Good morning, everyone. This is another episode of the Canadian Immigration Live Q&A, and I'm here today with Alicia. And I know that we should have started this live Q&A about 43 minutes ago, but that didn't work out. And so we're terribly sorry for that. I see that we have around 15 people and one like, so it's going to take some time before people pile up again. How are you doing, Alicia?
Oh, I'm doing all right, Igor. We just had our first express entry draw, I noticed yesterday, so that is good. I guess it really remains to be seen what will happen with express entry because there's a lot of turmoil right now in Canadian politics, and it we're not sure what's going to get passed or what's going to happen within the next few months, and there may be an election called and a change in government. So all of these things are kind of up in the air right now. And we're waiting on a few things. I've had a number of consults. I think, Igor, you've been super busy this week as well. And a lot of people are trying to figure out what to do for 2025 because we're still waiting on, okay, what are the category-based selection draws for express entry for 2025? We're hoping that the government will announce it. I know I've had some consults with people who are really anxious about what's going to happen with spousal open work permits because the government had said that they were going to change that before the end of 2024. Those announcements weren't made, so those announcements are still on hold, but they could come out at any time. And people are really trying to figure out what's going to happen with draws. We know that they have also said that they are going to get rid of job offer points. So they announced that, but they haven't actually implemented it. So maybe, Igor, if you want to pull that up, we can look at the announcement about the end of job offer points for express entry because that's going to have a huge impact for a number of people who were really hoping, or their employer actually got them an LMIA, and they were hoping for those 50 points for that LMIA supported job offer arranged employment, or maybe they've been working for a few years under a free trade agreement under an IMP, employer specific work permit, and they were hoping for those 50 job offer points. So the government has said that they are going to take those points away, seems like for everybody, but they have only said that it will happen in the spring of 2025. But we expect that that will require legislative changes. And so if there's a change in government, we now have to stay tuned to see what's going to happen.
All right, I think that's the one. Let me just make it a little larger so that everyone can see. Um,
Mm.
I still have to figure out how to make it all the way full screen, but regardless. So yeah, that's the announcement that Alicia is talking about, right?
So this happened right before Christmas, and it's a little bit of a surprise. We did hear from the minister earlier that they are looking at reducing fraud and that the LMIA system has been being abused. And unfortunately, instead of cracking down on the people who are abusing LMIA system, they are now taking away points for everybody. And it seems like they're taking away points for everybody. So we know that there's three different scenarios where you could get points for arranged employment under express entry, and two of those require you to have an LMIA job supported offer, and the other one is if you're under an international mobility program that is closed, employer specific. And it seems like they're taking it away for everybody. So that is the bad news. And what we don't know is when and that shoe will drop. So it says the spring of 2025, but because they do need to enact changes to the actual Immigration Act and regulations, or regulations and ministerial instructions, then we'll have to stay tuned and see if they actually implement those in the spring.
Yeah. And Alicia, I cannot talk about this, but just last week, um, shortly after the year began, we had a live stream with Mark that we looked at all changes that happened throughout 2024. And I would take people to the blog post on our website. So we broke down all of these changes in 2024 by months. So you can see what happened in January, in February, and so on and so on. And the point was that was a year of change. That's how we named it. So many things have changed. It's crazy. We would never expect that that year would be so rich in events. Do you think that 2025 will be richer?
Well, I mean, we talked a little bit about politically what's happening, and of course, with Justin Trudeau saying that he's going to be stepping down, and then, everything's kind of up in the air in terms of what's going to happen with the Liberal Party leadership. And then it seems like, of course, one of the opposition parties is going to be triggering a snap election in the spring. Yeah, anything's possible, Igor, because if now there's a new government elected, then there might be large-scale changes to immigration legislation, policy. We'll have to figure out what's going to happen. The only thing is that it is a complicated portfolio, and so it might take whatever new government there is a while before they actually implement changes. So we'll just have to see what happens. But yeah, I expect that 2025 is going to be another year of a lot of different immigration policies and updates and changes to the systems.
Okay, and then my next question then to you and to everyone else, and please write down in the comments and what do you think? What word would you choose to describe 2025? Will it further shrink or expand? And by it, I mean immigration. Do you think different options will become less available and there will be less of those options, or you think there will be some other pathways, new pathways?
Unfortunately, my prediction, and we don't have the crystal ball because Mark's not here right now, but my prediction is that it's going to shrink, right? That there's a backlash right now against immigration. There has been, a sentiment that housing is tied to immigration and people are worried about affordable places to live. And so we have heard from the conservative side that, there might be some linkage between available housing and immigration levels. And if that's the case, then immigration is definitely probably going to be drawn back. It's going to shrink.
Okay. Yeah, so we have a comment from Amir, and he says shrink because we're entering a recovery period. And let's see, did anyone else respond to that question? But it doesn't look like. Because what I think about it all is it's going to be a very turbulent year, especially the first half of the year is going to be crazy. So, well, first we have prorogued government, so no new bills can be passed. And I cannot help but think about the citizenship bill, the new amendments to the Citizenship Act that would allow to pass the second generation citizenship. That was the thing in early 2024 when there was this Bjorkquist case. And then they told, okay, we need to make changes by, I think they said like somewhere in the end of summer or early spring. And then they postponed it until December 19th. Sorry, my dog is freaking out. Sorry. That's what happens when you work from home. But that didn't happen in December as well. And then now it's not going to happen until at least March 24th. And then when the new elections are here, then it's going to take another couple of months. So so many things will get postponed. But many people are wondering, and maybe Alicia, you can help them out here. Does this decision to prorogue the government until March 24th means that there will be no draws or no changes to immigration policy, or the Ministry of Immigration still operates just as usual?
Mhm. Yeah, and so we saw that there have been draws, right? There was an express entry draw just yesterday, so that has already happened. Of course, it was a PNP draw, and maybe Igor, you can pull that up. And so
Mm-hmm.
immigration will still continue to function, right? The immigration department is a ministry within the government, and it will still continue to process applications and to function. What we don't know, though, is like in the cases where they have to change express entry law, whether anything will happen because they can't pass laws right now. And so, even though they're saying they're taking away job offer points, they might not be able to pass that new legislation for who knows how long. And so it'll be interesting to see in the express entry draws what kind of draws will they be doing. So I think for sure PNPs will continue to happen because those are people who have nominations from a particular province. They get those 600 points, and immigration basically always continues with those PNP draws. And they're not super huge, right? They're only issuing 471 invitations, ITAs went out. And the CRS is 793. So those people, considering that they have 600 points for that PNP nomination, they really only had a few points outside of that nomination.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing will be, what do they continue with? Will they do another CEC draw? Because we know that people right now that are sitting in the pool and have an express entry profile, they're still benefiting from those 50 points if they have a job offer. So maybe they just don't do CEC draws. Maybe they will only do healthcare draws or only do French draws. It remains to be seen. So that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on to see what happens with immigration. Because of all the changes in government, they might be reluctant to do something that's going to shake the boat at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much, Alicia. I think that was a pretty solid introduction of what our sentiments are about the whole year. So I want to return back to the comments that we received and first say hello to everyone. So Marihari says hello, and then we have messages from a question from Marihari, but we'll come back to that later. And then we have a message from Great Ethiopia wishing us Happy New Year. Queen Alicia, okay. And then Grace Salvador says, good morning. Guys, let us know where you tune from. And then who else did say hello? Many people, though. Before I get to every other comment, I want to start off with the super chats because they get the priority processing. Okay, so this one is from Nash. Do I need to work in construction or agri-food to qualify for the AAIP Express Entry Priority Stream, or is it okay for my knock not to start with 1 or 6? So it's December 10th draw. Alicia, you the pro in how AAIP does their draws.
Yeah, so maybe Igor, what you can do is show people how we go and double check the draw parameters. And so basically you're going to go to the AAIP website, and I agree, it is hard to navigate, guys. It's not something that's super straightforward to find. So you're going to go to the AAIP website, you're going to go to the processing summary totals, and this is a giant long page. And so you're going to go down and review the specific draw parameters, which are way down on the page, maybe about halfway down. And then from there, you're going to take a look, and it's got each of the draws. And so I think Igor's trying to find it too. Yeah, there we go. And so we're going to go and scroll back. I think you said Nash December 10th.
December 10th.
Okay, so there's only one draw on December 10th, which is good because sometimes there's multiple draws and then it gets confusing. But on December 10th, so it was an Alberta Express entry, priority sectors with the following parameters. And so that middle column is what your, oh gosh, you've got to go scrolling all the way up to it, what your worker EOI was, and then the number, so minimum score, worker EOI. And then the furthest right-hand column is the number of invitations that was issued in that draw, in that round. So basically, making sure, and this is one of the things in Alberta that's a little bit confusing, is people will get an email and they're like, great, I've got a notification of interest. But then that email says, before you click the link and continue with your application, go back and check the draw parameters to see if you actually qualified for the draw. And so there's problems in the system, right? Sometimes that you might by accident get an email and you won't qualify for that draw parameter. So it is very important before you click that next link to start your application, you go back and check this. So first off, Nash, make sure if you got a notification of interest that you have a worker EOI of at least 65. And if you don't, you're not going to be eligible. The next thing is you've got to make sure that you meet Alberta Express Entry minimum eligibility criteria. And so that means that you have to have a valid federal Express Entry profile. You have to have a CRS score of at least 300 points. You have to be meeting eligibility for CEC or FST or FSW, right? So under the federal scheme. The next thing is making sure that you have language test results to back up the fact that you're getting your CLB at least 5 or higher, and you make sure that you have a valid full-time job offer and 12 months of work experience. So these are all part of the parameters that they decided to draw in addition to the regular Alberta Express Entry minimum eligibility. And then here's where it gets down to the primary occupation in Express Entry and a job offer with an Alberta employer in an occupation that is not an ineligible occupation. So if you go back to the website, it'll show what the ineligible occupation lists are, and it can't be an occupation. So it is not an occupation in the not categories with occupational categories of 1 for business and finance or 6 for sales. So something other than those. And then you'll have to go back and cross-reference what the primary occupation in your Express Entry profile is, right? So it's two things. You have your federal Express Entry profile, so you have to check what you listed as your primary knock in your federal Express Entry profile. And then you've got to go and check what you listed on your worker EOI for your job offer. So making sure that that is not on the ineligible list and it's not in a knock in your category 1 or 6.
Yeah. And Alicia, I look at the question. So is it okay for my knock not to start with 1 or 6? So they directly precluded knock starting with 1 or 6 from this draw. So it's totally okay. It's actually what you need, not to have your knock
Right.
start with a 1 or 6.
Right. And it is confusing. I know what you mean, Nash, because when you look at priority sectors, so I don't know, there's another web page. So when you look at Express Entry, then it gives you kind of Express Entry priority sectors, and it talks about that, or it talks about family members. And so as long as that draw parameter doesn't say that you specifically have to be in a certain knock, because if you look at some of the other draw parameters, they specifically say it has to be within these knocks. So as long as it doesn't say that, and this one doesn't seem to, then Nash, hopefully you should be okay with proceeding as long as you don't have a knock that is a 1 or a 6 and that's not listed as your primary occupation in your Federal Express Entry profile.
And here's a disclaimer. This is not a legal advice. It's just for the
Mhm.
information. So we're not telling you proceed and then
Right.
you cannot come back to us and say, you told me.
Yeah.
We're just giving you the information, how to interpret it. And then if you need legal advice, you know where to go. It's our website, holthelaw.com. You can see it right here at the bottom. And then you can book a consultation with us.
Mhm.
All right, Alicia, then we have one more super chat. This one is from Amir, and he said hello to us earlier. So he says, I have 526 Express Entry CRS score and a postgrad expiring in 14 days. What do you think are my options if I want to continue working if possible? Ooh, I have this
Yeah.
question quite often right now.
And so this is something that's happening for a lot of people, and I've written a few articles about what to do if my work permit's expiring. What are my options? What can I do to try to change status or to maintain status? And so maybe, Igor, you can pull up our website and we can direct people to, yeah, so
Time's
if
up,
you,
serious.
yeah, go to our Times Up series basically. So you can take a look here and, how long can I stay in Canada after my work permit expires? So this is the article specifically that's going to go through your options. Now, I think, Amir, you said that you've got like 16 days before your PGWP expires. So that is, or 14 days. So that's not a lot of time. So it's not usually a very good situation if you only have 2 weeks before your work permit expires to try to think about what your options are to switch status. Unless you have an employer-specific job offer, and Igor, this might be an article that I write pretty soon because this is something that I've been seeing people come up with frequently. So there are two categories of work permits. There are ones that require an LMIA, and there are ones that are LMIA exempt but are still employer specific. And those are things like free trade agreements or, yeah, so there's a list here of the things under the IMP. Sometimes that includes the Francophone mobility. So that is employer specific, but it's a closed work permit and it's exempt from the LMIA process. But you need your employer to actually file that employer portal offer through their account. The employer has to pay a $230 compliance fee, and then you would have to do an application to change conditions in your work permit. Same thing, if you filed your permanent residence application and you actually have your acknowledgement of receipt, there are two different things. There's bridging open work permits and there's bridging closed work permits. And if there are restrictions on your employment, you'd know that from looking at your certificate of nomination from the province. It's going to say restrictions on employment, yes or no. If there is a restriction on your employment, it's really important that people know they don't file that bridging open work permit, they're going to get refused. They need to file a bridging closed work permit. But before they can file that bridging closed work permit, they need the employer to do that offer of employment through the employer portal. And so there are a number of things that you need to double check if you want to try to extend your status. We know, of course, that you can't, unless you're in a very specific recapture of time situation where your passport had expired too early and that's why you didn't get the full term on your PGWP, there's no way to extend a PGWP. So even if you went back to school, if you managed to get a study permit, you can't get a second PGWP. So it's really important for people to think about their options early to make sure that they're not overstaying. So Amir, I'd suggest reach out, book a consultation with Igor or myself, and we can ask you and go through your history and try to figure out, do you have options to try to extend or change your status in Canada? Or sometimes the best option is going home, right? Because if you have such a strong CRS score, if your score's in the 520s, and you can use that Canadian work experience basically for the next 2 years. So they will look at the last 3-year period, and so you can make sure that you go home, get some foreign work experience if you haven't maxed your foreign work experience points, and take a look at continuing to keep that express entry profile active and hope that you get an invitation to apply within the next 2 years. So make sure you're not overstaying or breaching your conditions, because that could make you inadmissible to Canada. And please reach out, book a consult. We can talk to you specifically about what your options might be.
Yeah. And Alicia, so I wanted to share my own experience from yesterday. So I had a very long consult. It was just a 30-minute consult, but then I kept extending it. And I just really wanted to help the guys, And so it ended up being an hour and 30-minute long call. But it's crazy what I've learned from them. So very bright couple. And again, I have to be mindful of client confidentiality. A very bright couple, but essentially they had their post-grad work permit expiring, and they reached out to an immigration consultant who advised them, just submit an application for the open work permit. And so you're going to submit an application for the open work permit, and they didn't have an LMIA. They didn't have anything, no international trade agreement, just a frivolous application. Just submit it, have it in process. And it was in process, so they maintained their worker status. They also applied for the visitor record at the same time, and it took RCC half a year to process it. And so they worked until the end of until the day when their application was refused. But their open work permit application was refused because there was no basis for it. But their visitor record was approved. And so now they stay in Canada in a legal status on their visitor record. And it's crazy that some consultants and some practitioners would advise to submit a frivolous application with no legal basis for it. And now their visitor record is running out in like half a year. And they wonder, like, what do we do? And they have above 500 CRS points. And like just what you mentioned, sometimes the only option is to go back home. Luckily for them, they have another LMIA in the process. And if that gets approved, then they can apply for the work permit. But again, the government is trying to stick holes in the wheel, and trying to prevent you from using those loopholes. And you have to leave Canada to apply for the work permit from outside Canada. And so they're just wondering, like, what do we do now? We're stuck. We cannot work. We cannot continue paying our rent. We cannot go back home because their country is a mess. And there is a big, big problem with their hometown. And it's just, I felt so bad for this couple. And I realized there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the situation. And it's so important that you don't just submit a frivolous application, because everything that you do becomes part of your immigration record. And if you were the officer and you know that someone just submitted an application so that they continue to work and maintain status, how would you feel about that?
Yeah.
We as lawyers would probably lose our license, or at least get some kind of fine from the law society if we were to do it. But there are some people who just don't care, and there's nothing out there to punish them for this advice.
Yeah, and I mean that is something that's coming up. I know there was a news article just this morning that I sent around to everybody about consultants and the fact that people are starting to try to launch a class action suit to say, or specific lawsuits to say, hey, the regulators for consultants are not doing what they need to be doing to try to enforce the fact that there needs to be accountability in terms of terrible advice or people taking their money that are consultants and not lawyers. And so, there are specific examples of people who have been doing this, but it takes 30 months before the regulator actually does anything. With lawyers, it's a whole different ballgame, right? Like if we do something that's unethical or that takes somebody's money, we are immediately in a situation where we have to justify what's going on. There's public trust money that gets repaid to those people who've had their finances taken. We can get disbarred. It's very, very serious. So make sure that you are careful about who you're getting your immigration advice from. Under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, Section 91, it can only be somebody who is a properly registered consultant or an immigration lawyer, or in certain provinces, there are types of paralegals who are authorized to give advice. But that's it. So it's really important that you are getting proper advice. Both Igor and I and Mark are immigration lawyers, and we've been practicing in this field for a number of years. So we have seen many horror stories, and we are hoping that you avoid the horror stories.
Yeah, and just a fun fact for those who are unaware. So we as Canadian immigration lawyers, we have to pay two parts of the fees, yearly fees, right? So you can either pay them in installments and so on. And so if you break down those fees by month, it turns out that you pay for insurance more than what you pay for the law society fees. So insurance is something really important, something that we spend a lot of money for, and it just underlines that we take our profession seriously, and the stakes are so high, and it takes so many years and so much effort to get this license, to have this privilege of practicing law in Canada, that it's a little bit different standard. I'm not saying that immigration consultants are not trustworthy. There are some wonderful immigration consultants, and probably there would be some lawyers who would no longer maintain their license with the Law Society and become consultants, because there are just so many different ways how you can benefit from being a consultant, like referral fees and stuff. But for us, this is not just the craft that allows us to bring food on the table. It's something that we live and love with our heart. And this is the profession that we think is very prestigious and very responsible. And so when we speak with clients, it's not us saying what you want to hear, it's us saying what you need to hear. And sometimes people don't like it, and sometimes we get bad reviews just because we're saying you have no other option but to go home. And in fact, that was my solution for that client from yesterday. And there's always some opportunities, especially if you accumulated this Canadian work experience already. Just go back home, obtain the 6 months of work experience in one of the category trades, like become a carpenter, work for 6 months, qualify for the trade occupation category. There are so many different ways, but you have to explore all options, and don't just buy the option, oh, I'm going to apply for the refugee protection, or I'm going to submit an H&C application, I'm going to submit a frivolous work permit application. That's not an option. If someone tells you to do something like this to game the system, run away. And don't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, I've had a number of consults with people who basically now are stuck in a situation where immigration's saying misrepresentation, right? Because they followed bad advice and now they're stuck because just like Igor said, everything that you put on your immigration application is there forever. Immigration can go back and cross-reference, especially now they're using all the AI tools to cross-reference what you've said in past applications. And so they will know what you said on your initial study permit or your initial work permit or a subsequent visitor extension. And if it doesn't match up and it doesn't make sense to them what you're doing and why, um, misrepresentation is real. Immigration officers are alleging it frequently, and it's something that would make you inadmissible for 5 years. So it's never worth running into misrep. Like I know, Igor, I had a set of clients as well, um, PhD, and they had over 500 CRS, and they just could not get an invitation to apply. Like there weren't draws. And so I said, well, you know what, your status is running out. It makes sense for you to go home and just continue to accumulate some foreign work experience, sit tight, hope for another draw. And there was a draw, and they got an invitation, and we submitted their PR application. And so, there hopefully is going to be a pathway, but make sure that you're following the rules.
Yeah. All right, Alicia, I propose that we take on the super chat from Grace. So Grace is asking, is it true that a spouse of an international student is not eligible to create an expression of interest in Alberta, even if the open work permit spouse has tier 0 job or for 2 years in Canada? I'm not exactly sure where this comes from.
Um, so Grace, yeah, I'm confused by that as well. So normally, Alberta has basically said, look, we're opening up an expression of interest system, but they don't have any way to vet whether somebody is actually eligible for the categories. And so they leave it to the applicants to decide whether they're eligible. And so if you look right now, I think there's over 27,000, I looked 2 days ago, over 27,000 applicants sitting in the expression of interest worker pool. But that does not mean that those people are actually eligible for a category. And so even though you can do your EOI score and maybe you have 60 points, on the points grid or whatever points you have, you also still have to be eligible for one of the categories. And so the main categories are the Alberta Opportunity Stream or the Alberta Express Entry Stream. That's mostly where people are meeting the eligibility requirements. So basically, what you do is you go back to the Alberta website or any of the PNP websites, and this is true for all the provinces, make sure that you are fitting all of the eligibility criteria for the specific stream that you're looking at. And you can go through and it'll show, okay, what are the streams? What are the eligibility requirements? Am I meeting every single one of those eligibility requirements? And to my knowledge, I don't see anything that says you're not eligible if you have a spouse who is an international student to create an EOI, as long as you meet all the eligibility criteria for, let's say, Alberta Express Entry linked.
Okay. All right, Alicia, I want to pull up this question from Satrikan. I'm on a visitor record now. Can I apply for Francophone mobility work permit inside Canada?
Yeah. And so this is something that has changed. So it used to be under temporary public policies because of COVID, people who were here on visitor records could apply from inside Canada for a change of status to a work permit. That has all been taken away. So basically in the fall, they said, nope, we're going to change that legislation. We're going to quickly end. It was supposed to have continued until February. And then they said, no, we're just going to take it away. And so they took it away early. They took it away, what was that date? August 28th, Igor?
Yeah.
So they took it away in August. So no longer, if you are here on a visitor record, you are not allowed to submit an application to change conditions to apply for a work permit from inside Canada. So you would have to apply online as an outside Canada application for that Francophone mobility work permit.
Mm-hmm. This one is very interesting, Alicia. My closed work permit application was denied because my employer had not received an LMIA decision yet from ESDC. Can I still restore my status as a worker if they receive a positive LMIA within the 90 days?
Jimmy, this is a super complex situation, so please book a consult. This has been happening. I've heard of this happening quite a bit because what what's going on is that you need two departments to basically sync up. And the LMIA processing times right now are through the roof. It's insane. Like, we filed an application originally in February. They didn't take the processing fees. When they did take the processing fees, the corporate contact was away from the office. Therefore, they closed the application. We resubmitted in April. We've been waiting since April for a decision on this LMIA. All the ads have to stay up and current. It's crazy. It is now January. There is still zero contact from ESDC Service Canada on that LMIA. So what's been happening for other people is that because ESDC is taking so long to decide on that LMIA application, meanwhile, they've submitted their work permit, they've asked IRCC to wait for ESDC to make a decision on the LMIA, but IRCC's policy is they're not going to wait that long, right? Normally, they're only waiting about 90 days max, so 3 months, and ESDC is probably taking upwards of 6 or 7 months, maybe even more right now, to make a decision on an LMIA. So then you get situations just like this one where IRCC says, too bad, we're refusing the work permit because there's no underlying LMIA from the company. And it's a very tricky situation to try to figure out how to save it. And we would need to take a look at exactly what happened when, and is there a restoration possibility depending on when your last status was valid.
Yeah. So Mark typically rings a little bell to direct you to book a consult. I don't have that sound effect on my end. I should add it because it comes up pretty often. But Alicia, speaking of LMIA and the processing, so with that couple from yesterday, they've been waiting for their LMIA since July. What is your experience dealing with LMIAs, and how long does it normally take?
It's ridiculous right now, Igor. Like I said, we submitted in April, still no decision, and that's insane, right? Like, that is way too long. If you go to the LMIA ESDC website, it technically has processing times, and they're completely bogus if they're saying like something like 59 business days, which is just not accurate. So it's not good right now if people are waiting on an LMIA. And of course, we know that they're going to take away those job offer points from the LMIA theoretically in the spring of this year. So it's a double whammy for people.
Speaking of the LMIA job offer points, many people are confused how this will affect the CRS score. Will the scores drop, or will they remain about the same? People would just get extra, like, will they reduce the number of points available total? Would it not be 600 but 550? Or that's a misconception, and it's just that the CRS score will drop. What do you think?
I mean, we have to wait to see what they do with the ministerial instructions and with the regulations, because right when this happened, Mark and I had a long live podcast, and we actually went through and we showed people, here are the regulations, here are the ministerial instructions, this is what they would have to change. And right now there are points for job offer in your minimum eligibility for FSW. And so that's a different scale. And then there are also points for your CRS when you're looking at if you've already met your minimum eligibility, what your CRS points are. So there's two different sections where they would have to change the points. So we will have to see how they do it, what they take away, and whether they just take it off the board or whether they reduce the overall points allocation. But probably the easier thing for them to do that would not require a change in the legislation is the minister could go in and just do a ministerial instruction change. So there's actually ministerial instructions every time there's an express entry draw, and they update those fairly frequently. It would be fairly easy for them to take away those 50 points. So it wouldn't change the overall scale. They would just say nobody's eligible anymore, assuming they've already met minimum eligibility criteria for one of the categories, CEC, FSW, FST. They would just take away those bonus 50 points for a job offer under arranged employment. That's probably the easiest thing for them to actually implement.
Okay. This question is very interesting. So, as we talked about shrinking immigration, many people are wondering what's happening to the parent and grandparent program. So, will they just completely suspend the program, or they pause the intake? And while you prepare to answer this question, Alicia, here's the web page. So it's Canada Gazette, Part 1 from January 4th. And then when you scroll down, here's this announcement. So what do we know, Alicia?
Well, maybe you can read it out, Igor, because I haven't actually had a chance to take a look at the Gazette, but it's not good, right? Like they're basically, we know that our overall targets are significantly reduced, and they are not going to be doing things to expand programs.
Yeah, so here what they say. So unless a new intake for the 2025 year is implemented, so if they announce a new intake, okay, good. But if that's not happening, if there's no new intake, they will just continue processing only the applications submitted in 2024. So essentially, they pretty much say, we're not going to take new applications for PGP in 2025. So if you have not yet received an invitation to submit an application, no luck for you in 2025. It's only those who managed to submit their applications in 2024. So that's pretty much the whole scoop. So the program is not suspended. It's not terminated. They continue processing all of those applications. They just don't expect another draw in 2025, and unless something crazy happens and they decide, oh, for some reason we need more parents and grandparents here in Canada, which I don't see happening, especially after the elections. All right. We had a couple of questions asking about the same thing. So how can the latest changes in Canadian politics affect French draws? And then the other person asked, what will happen to Francophone immigration after the shift in politics and elections?
Mm-hmm. And so if you actually kind of trawl back through the notices in the IRCC webpage, when you look at the newsroom and the notices, a lot of the Francophone initiatives were enacted because of legislation. There are specific Francophone federal laws, and they are trying to hit targets to promote population levels outside of the province of Quebec. And so those are existing federal agreements. And so unless they renegotiate or change those existing federal agreements, those Francophone draws will probably stick around. However, what we don't know is, let's say there is a change in government, let's say there's a conservative government that gets elected, then it is possible for them to take away the bonus points for French, right? Because that's under immigration's purview. Immigration doesn't necessarily have to give those 50 bonus points for people who hit that NCLC level 7. So it is possible that those bonus points could be taken away, but they would continue to do French draws. It would just kind of even the playing field quite a bit. And it would mean that potentially Francophone applicants won't have that uplift of the extra 50 points. But you know, it's all gazing in a crystal ball. It's all speculation at this point because we just don't know.
Yeah. Alicia, this comment is very interesting. So Miss P says that she's watching from Philippines and it's almost 3 a.m. here. Miss P, why you're not sleeping? Well, that's my question to you, but thank you for being such a loyal follower. And Miss P is saying, for Agri-Pilot program, there is a processing time of 5 months, and it's already 7 months for them. So Alicia, here I wanted to share this resource that we looked at with Mark in the last live stream where we summed up 2024. So this is a very interesting tool. I have to be honest, I just recently discovered it. It allows you to see how many applications are in the backlog, and you can pretty much see in percentage and the number of cases. And it's a little outdated, so the numbers you see there are like 2 months behind. So I think the last numbers that we have are for November 2024, but relatively recent, right? So you can see that there's over 1 million applications in the backlog. Just to reiterate, it was around 900,000 in the beginning of 2024. So the backlog continues to grow. When you click on the backlog, it tells you how many applications are in the backlog, depending whether that's a temporary residence or permanent residence. So about 38% of all permanent residence applications in the backlog. So every third application is in the backlog. Then you can click here and take a look at the breakdown. What applications are in the backlog and what was the backlog standard, like target, right? So they have this target of 20% and then the number of projected backlogs. So they pretty much do accordingly to their projected backlog for express entry. For PNPs, it's above the backlog. And so they just provided an update, actually. It was November 24th, the last known date. For spouses, you can see it's below the backlog target. And then temporary residence applications, you can see 75% of all applications are in the backlog. So it takes more to process the application than they actually project. So when you say the application is in process for 7 months, not 5 months, I would say it's pretty normal in the realities.
Yeah. Yeah, and Miss P, so the other thing, and Igor, I just sent you a link to the notices, but the other thing is, Miss P, you're actually really lucky that you had your application already submitted, because they did just submit a notice on January 3rd saying bad news for Agri-Food for 2025, because there are way too many people who are applying for the Agri-Foods program. Basically, they're capping it, and they're saying, all right, we are only going to be taking another 1,010 spots. And this program is going to expire on May 14th, 2025, or until we get 1,010 applicants. And whichever comes first, this program expires. It seems like it is not going to be extended. And so, if you are thinking about the Agri-Food pilot and you have not submitted this application yet, make sure to do so right away, because those 1,010 spots are probably going to be gone in a snap. So
Yeah. This question, Alicia, is interesting as well. So do I need to have the funds in my account when I submit my express entry profile or when I get an ITA?
Mm-hmm. And so if you go to the IRCC Express Entry page and you look at proof of funds, it talks to you about what you need to do to prove it. And it does say at the time of application, right? So this is a question. Is the time of application when you create your profile, or is the time of application when you actually submit your EAPR? To be safe, it's best to have the funds at both times, right? So here's what we're talking about. Igor has gone to the IRCC page, what we accept as proof of funds for express entry. And Igor, that's too small for me to read, but maybe you
Oh,
can read
sorry.
it out.
Okay. Okay. So average balance, this is what's important.
Yeah, so average balance for the last 6 months. And so at the time of application, they want to know that for the last 6 months, you have had those funds in your account and it's in your name. And if you are putting in like a large lump sum, if you've gotten some money from a parent or a family member, then you will definitely want to get a gift deed, a notarized gift deed, to show immigration, here's where that money came from, and you're going to keep that money in that account and make sure you don't touch it and that it stays above the minimum settlement fund requirement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting because some people would submit their express entry profile even though they don't have any single chance. And what's even more ridiculous is some people would advise them and charge them for submitting their profile when they know that there is no chance this person would have an ITA. So it doesn't really mean that when you submit a profile, you will get an ITA within the next 6 months. But for some people, when they submit an express entry profile, there's almost a 100% guarantee that they will get an ITA within the month or two. And for those people, it's really important that they show that they have their own funds and did not borrow those funds from someone. That's why RCC is looking for 6 months. So it really comes down to your individual situation. But at the time of EAPR, the officer will look back and try to understand where the money came from. So if you have large sum deposits, you also want to explain those, even if they happened before 6 months or within the 6 months. Like, it really is case specific. Alicia, as we coming close to the end of the live stream, I wanted to I wanted to pull a question, but I lost it. Sorry. Okay, let's pull this question from Omar. It's the latest question. So What are the possible reasons they are asking for the third time for Schedule A after 9-month insecurity and 20 months total? Just asking for a fresh copy without any fixes. Oof.
Omar, so a little alarm bell is ringing in Igor and I's heads because normally it's not a good thing when they're asking for an updated Schedule A the third time. It means that they are probably trying to reject your application saying that you misrepresented or that there's something that just does not make sense in your personal history, your work history, your travel history, maybe your police certificates. So they're basically trying to pin you down and say, commit to something because we're going to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to be really careful and make sure that you have cross-referenced everything in your applications because there's a reason why they're asking you for this, especially if your file has been stuck in background security clearance for 20 months. So they might be doing some checking with other governments to see if there is possible criminality or inadmissibility or misrepresentation. And so it's really important that you go back, you have copies hopefully of all your previous applications and all the changes and updates that you've made on your current application. Go back and make sure that everything's 100% correct and explain if there are things that are discrepancies. So again, this is one where I'd ring the bell and say book a consult because that's not a good situation.
Yeah, and it really also comes down to my mind, Alicia. Sometimes when the application is stuck in processing for 20 months and should have been completed, let's say, in 6, IRCC can get in trouble for that, right? And that's the mandamus applications that I'm talking about. But the courts also look at whether there was this implied decision to refuse. So not processing your application doesn't mean we're going to refuse it. We're just going to keep it indefinitely in the queue. And that also amounts to this implied refusal to process, right? And so when things happen on your file and there is proof that IRCC is actually doing something, that kind of becomes a roadblock for you to actually coming after IRCC and saying, you don't do anything on my file. And they show we actually do. It just takes time. So it's a not really nice situation. And it's really hard to predict whether you're going to get like into this long security screening. Some people get into comprehensive security, right? Which can take months after months and after months. And it's really bad for you. We feel for you, Amar. Alicia, I think we should wrap up. I know you have some other things to do. I do have a lot of client work that I have to finish on. But one thing before we wrap up, I wanted to again take everyone back to our website, holthelaw.com. So go to our website if you have any questions that you need assistance with. If you have an individual situation that requires us to give you legal advice, you can always book a consultation. We do have 2 different consult types. It's a short 25-minute call and 50-minute call, and you can book the consult with any one of us. We have different availability, so check everyone's calendar to see if someone is available on the date when you can connect. And then we send you the legal services, not legal services, an immigration intake form. So we ask for all the information up front and we come to the consultation prepared. So it's not just 25 minutes on the call. It's us actually taking some time to dig the information, get to know your case. And then when we come for the call, we dive right straight into the point. And then on our website, you can also find our blog, which is where we share this free information that is super helpful for people. So you can understand the difference between inside Canada and outside Canada spousal sponsorship application. You can understand the difference between different types of LMIAs. What can you do if your status expires and so on. And finally, I want to take you all to our Express Entry course. Let me see. I think it's in here. So that's the course that Mark recorded. It has hours and hours of video lessons on how to complete your Express Entry profile and the APR and how to avoid most common mistakes. A very comprehensive course. I think if you take it, you would know about Express Entry almost as much as we do. And then we also have the TRV course. So if you want to apply for a visitor visa for your friends or your family member or for yourself, you can also get a TRV course. And you can see it's on sale right now. Finally, Alicia, we have 150 people watching the live stream and only 17 of them liked this video. So I highly encourage you to like the video, subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss the next live Q&A. And we will be back online on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Anything else to add here, Alicia?
I think those are some of the key things right now. And yeah, there were lots of good questions. We're sorry if we didn't answer your question specifically. We try to answer questions that are going to have broad applicability and help a lot of people. So yeah, stay tuned. And if you do need to speak with us and book a consultation so that we can give you specific advice, please do that so we can talk to you specifically. We're trying to give people the best immigration information that we can. And if you need advice, then definitely we are lawyers and we will be happy to speak with you one-on-one.
Okay. And Alicia, there's one thing that I cannot skip. Sorry. It just happened. It just happened. CRS score distribution for the candidates in the pool as of January 8th. So we have the new CEC draw, and we just talked about it. Will they do any CEC draws? So the CRS is 542 and 1,300 invitations.
So yeah,
That's the answer. That's the answer. Congratulations to everyone who got their ITAs. Okay. We'll wrap up and see you next week.